Good evening, fellow Toastmasters, most welcome guests. Very happy to be in front of you, all wonderful people, this evening. What I'd like to first say is that, as well as being a Toastmaster and a speaker who have really enjoyed being in Toastmasters, I also am really passionate about food. I like eating because I love food, but I also enjoy the social aspects of food. I've been a food blogger since about 10 years ago. I started writing my own little reviews of restaurants online, and I took photographs of food at restaurants around Vancouver. And 10 years ago, I was really eccentric to be taking photos in restaurants. Nowadays, you always see these young people with their iPhone snapping their sushi. But 10 years ago, I was this really eccentric, tall guy taking photos of food. And now it's become a popular thing. So I guess I was a bit of a trendsetter in some ways. What I wanted to talk about today is how the social aspects of food has become even more social with social media. Does anyone know what social media is? Can anyone call out some social media stuff? Facebook, yes. Twitter, yes. Pinterest, yes, that's another one. Yes, there's lots of them. These are all the great things. And if you go on any of these things like Instagram or Facebook, you're likely to see interesting photographs about food. First of all, I want to talk about how has this changed the restaurant business from the restaurateur's point of view. Being involved in the food community, I was a videographer at an event which had a bunch of restaurant owners speaking. And one of them was the co-founders of the Global Group. If you're familiar with the Global Group, they own about 5 really high-end restaurants in Vancouver. One of their founders, her name is Shannon, she was saying how running a restaurant is so much more interactive and fast-paced now that we have social media. Give an example. One day she was at her computer in her office, in the head office of her restaurant chain. And she found on Twitter, someone had tweeted that they really didn't like their glass of wine. They're so unhappy about it. So there was a bad situation. But they were still at the restaurant. And they were tweeting on their phone like, oh no, I don't like this wine. So what happened was she actually called the restaurant manager and said, you've got to help me out in this one. There's someone in your restaurant who just tweeted online that they don't like their glass of wine. Can you do something about it? Can you find this person? All we have is a little tiny picture of them. And so they found them, and they were able to solve the person's problem, offer them something else, and the problem was solved. So that's, as a restaurant consumer, you have a lot more power and input to give instant feedback to restaurants, and in turn, if restaurants are on the ball, they're going to be reacting in real time to your suggestions. So that's really interesting. But not only does social media still have an impact, but the traditional media, such as the newspapers, surprisingly does still have a really big influence on the popularity of restaurants. I'll give a quick example. My partner's mom works in a Vietnamese restaurant in the Vietnam area of Kingsway. Their restaurant was fortunately recently featured in the Vancouver Sun in a very glowing article by the reviewer Mia Stainsby, who's one of our longtime Vancouver restaurant reviewers. And the next 2 weeks actually, outside the door to the restaurant, there's huge lineups of people all waiting to get in. The Vancouver Magazine also did an article, so they've been doing really well. Some bloggers even went to that restaurant and interviewed the founder and did a video about him, put it on YouTube. So you can't really, even though social media is having a big impact, traditional media is still very influential too. But with all these new things going on, with the ability for people to communicate with restaurants and with each other, interact, there's also a little bit of a disadvantage or a darker side to this that I want to shed some light on. If you've been online, you might have encountered people who are very angry about restaurants they've been to. They've had a bad experience. They don't like the food, or they had to wait an hour before they got their food, or something wrong happened. So I want to read an example of a restaurant review that I think is quite typical of what you read out there. I think this is actually pretty funny too, because I'll see if you get the humor of it. So this is for a downtown restaurant. It's very upscale. And then this person rated the restaurant 2 out of 5 stars. The ambience is lovely and the guitar player a nice touch. The food is mediocre. My standards are high since I cook a lot, but the dishes were without a doubt very mediocre. I had a small spinach and strawberry salad to start, which had no dressing and tasted bland for $19. The risotto with 3 carefully placed prawns was okay, but very uninspiring. I was dying to go into the kitchen to reinvent what I was given. So they're not that nasty. She's written a bunch of other very negative ones, but that was an example of something that I thought was interesting because she's giving her opinion, but it's not necessarily a professional review. To say something is mediocre without saying what exactly was mediocre is not really fair. So, in conclusion, social media is changing the experience of the restaurant industry for both the restaurants and for the customers. It's becoming fun, fast-paced, and interactive. And if you didn't know, I have a YouTube channel with over 145 videos I've made of Vancouver restaurants. It's a big hobby and passion of mine, so for me it's a lot of fun as well. So for a food enthusiast and a blogger, getting involved in the promotion and publishing about restaurants is a great way to contribute to a restaurant's success and get involved. But you have to be a bit skeptical of what you read online because some people just want to go and complain. I think it's far better to go into a restaurant with open eyes and appreciate all the hard work that the staff are putting in to bring you that food on the table. So this speech was a fact-finding report. I would like to now ask you to ask me questions for 2 to 3 minutes about social media and restaurants. Anything you can think of that I haven't talked about that you'd like to hear, or any questions. Go ahead. Go ahead.
If you were to use social media in the most ideal way, being a foodie, how would you use it?
The question was, if I were to use social media in the ideal way, how would I use it? Well, I'd like to think that I already use it in the ideal way, which is to be very positive. I think it's no use bringing restaurants down, complaining, nitpicking about things. It's much better to reinforce the good things that happened. Because if you're always, it's kind of like if you're giving a speech evaluation, if you only say the negative things, the person doesn't have the feeling good about what they can improve or what they've done well. So I think that social media is like any kind of social interaction. It's a good, pays off to be nice. Yes?
As a restaurant owner, do you think it's important to respond to those, you know how you can respond on TripAdvisor and those sort of things? Do you think it's good to respond to them publicly or to send them a private message?
Okay, the question was, if I see a negative review on, say, TripAdvisor or a review, should I try to respond? And I think it looks really good to respond in public, especially since if you don't respond, that question about is it actually bad will still be there. But if you you should respond in private if you can as well. But I'd follow up online and show everyone else that you are concerned and you are interactive in responding to people's complaints and suggestions. Yes.
In the last month,
Yes.
if you have given a really good review to a restaurant, what kind of food was that, and what's the name of the restaurant?
Okay, this is great. They're gonna love this. So I went to a restaurant in Yaletown near my office called Yaletown Antipasto. They're a fairly new restaurant. They've been around for 1 year, and they're trying really hard. It's a family-owned business. They have the mother cooks the pastas, and the son serves it, and they're doing so nice. And they always give extra olives as appetizer, and I found they're doing a great job. They're really friendly, and they start to get to know the customers as well. So I gave them a really good review. Any other questions? Yes.
Is Yelp good for the restaurant industry?
So the question is about Yelp. Is it good for the restaurant industry? I haven't used Yelp myself. I'm not a Yelper. But I've heard restaurants don't like Yelp that much because Yelp is a little bit, dare I say, trying to get as much money out of them as possible. And they may even tend to delete reviews if something goes wrong or goes right. So I would say Yelp is a question I'm thinking about. With that, I want to say thank you. I've got Yelp. What is Yelp? Yelp.com. It's a website for restaurants where people can write comments about them. With that, I want to thank you all for participating in the questions, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks.